History is filled with the improbable. Colonies shattering the shackles of their overlords. A collection of small city-states throwing back the largest empire the world had ever seen. Often, what did happen does not line up with what we believe should have happened. So what if Britain conquered Siberia? This video was suggested over on the Discord. If you want your suggestion to be made into a video in the future, make sure you check out the That Annoying American Discord server. Link in the description. Alright, I'm not going to pretend this is a likely scenario, but it is based on some real history. In our timeline, the British East India Company, a corporation and notably not the British government, managed to conquer nearly the entirety of the Indian subcontinent. So there is a historical precedent of corporations leading colonial efforts. In the 1500s, the Company of Merchant Adventurers to New Lands was established to attempt and find a northern route to China. After a failed expedition, the company settled for a monopoly over whaling around the island of Spitsbergen and over trade with Russia. But what if, in an alternative timeline, the soon-to-be renamed Muscovy Company never gave up on finding that indeed possible northern route to China? Moreover, what if this led to a genuine effort to establish a long-term British presence in Siberia in spite of Russia? Well, let's make it happen. In 1613, the company is given a monopoly over whaling around the island of Spitsbergen, and in this timeline, decides to set up a small settlement on the island, as well as on nearby mainland Siberia, to give their whaling ships places to dock and repair. Such settlements would be small and frozen, and most definitely swiftly conquered by Russia, unless they were distracted. Yeah, I have to pull a lot of strings to get this one to work. Anyway, to west of Russia, Sweden was on a roll. Having just conducted a successful intervention in the 30 Years' War and making advances onto traditionally Poland-Lithuanian territory, they may be our ticket to a distracted enough Russia. Let's say in the 1630s, the company meets with the King of Sweden and promises English support in a war with Russia to expand Swedish control over the north. Let's say the English, seeing a northern route to China as a vital enough opportunity, agreed to support the Swedish and English whalers, sending troops to Sweden and arming the English settlers. During the war, Sweden is able to defeat the Russians handily enough that they give up the north, which is split between Sweden and the Muscovy Company. Over the next few decades, English whaling settlements see small growth as the company continues to search for the northern route. Finally, in the later 1600s, the route is discovered. This route is seen by England as a way to quickly and safely get to China in the summer months. Therefore, they pump more money into the Muscovy Company to secure the route. More settlements are established as far as the Kamchatka Peninsula. The Great Northern War of 1700 still occurs as Peter of Russia attempts to re-secure a coast for Russia. The company sends troops in support of Sweden, and be it because of this support or through other strategic decisions than in our own timeline, Sweden is victorious. Again, suspension of disbelief. This leaves Russia crippled beyond any capacity to effectively expand into Siberia. After the 7 Years' War later in the century, the northern route is seen as a quick way to reach British India. The East India and Muscovy companies begin to cooperate. To make the route as safe as possible, the entire coast of Siberia is claimed, though their effective control would remain near their settlements. Going forward to 1783, and the United States wins its independence from Britain. This opens a need for a prison colony in the British Empire. In our timeline, this need was filled by Australia. In this timeline, however, Siberia is seen as a closer and more efficient place to send convicts. This sees a boom in population in eastern Siberia of anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000 British prisoners. The colony begins to grow rapidly. After their victory over China in the First Opium War circa 1842, Britain claims all land north of China and east of Russia, who would have done some expansion into Central Asia, but never had enough steam to conquer all of Siberia. So there we have it, British Siberia. Other than looking a little wacky on a map, what does this change? Well, such a massive territory would most likely be ran much like New France was in the 1700s, with the natives having de facto control over most of the land and competing amongst one another for territory and resources to trade with the British. In the west, the Russians would begin to encroach into British territory. Whether it be direct expansion or just Russian settlers heading east, the Russians would be playing a game of chicken with the British, seeing how far they could encroach into Britain's vast territory without provoking the ire of the Empire. Speaking of Russia, most definitely the largest effect of this timeline is the near complete removal of Russia as a great power. Alongside the wars we had them lose to make this scenario possible, the conquest of Siberia came with such prestige through its sheer size that it propelled Russian status to one of a European great power. The biggest direct beneficiary of this is Sweden. Having dominated the Russians in the 16 and 1700s, Sweden's Empire of the North would have never fallen. In place of Russia, Sweden would be a real European great power. Perhaps they would act as the primary third partner of Prussia and Austria in a division of Poland-Lithuania, or perhaps such a division would never occur without the Russians standing on equal footing to the rest of Europe. Perhaps Poland-Lithuania remains an independent state into the 1800s, or maybe even a vassal of Sweden. The conquest of Siberia makes the British Empire, already the largest empire in history, much larger in this timeline. Not only this, the British have a much larger stake in securing northern East Asia. Perhaps the British would even attempt to colonize and conquer Japan to secure their route from Siberia to India. Speaking of, with their own route to Asia, granted one that could only be used in the summer months, would Britain have ever bothered to take South Africa from the Dutch? Or later, would Britain care to have a stake in the Suez Canal? Perhaps a Britain which colonized Siberia would be one much more interested and focused on the northern hemisphere. Looking to North America, perhaps in this timeline Britain would be much more reluctant to give up the Oregon Territory to America, seeing it as a threat to their interests in the northern Pacific. Perhaps we could see a third war between the British and Americans over the lands in the mid-1800s. Of course, none of this is in any way likely. Such scenarios as these tread so closely to the realm of fantasy, some may see them as pointless to even discuss. And perhaps that's true. But hey, it makes a fun story. Once again, shout out to Coke Pirate down in the Discord for suggesting this video. If you want to see your own suggestion made into a video in the future, make sure you join the That Annoying American Discord, link in the description below.